1A team, this is Frank, and it's nice to be with you again. I tried to get a video out last week, but wasn't able to do it. Things are going very well in the course. I've graded about half of your Vision Part 1s, and they are going extremely well. I'm very pleased with the progress that you are all making on those. I am obviously still home. Today was actually my first day attempting to get back to work. I've been on medical leave, I think I shared with you, for some surgery I had on my foot. But right now I am in my house. You can see the lovely fireplace behind me. So hopefully things are going well for you. I feel very good about the Part 1s that I've graded so far. I think everybody's right on track, even though people are taking a little bit different approach. That's perfectly normal. So last week you focused on student learning and really looked at root cause. Why do you think that the students aren't performing where you want them to perform? And so that's the first part of really understanding where you need to go with student learning. So this week you're going to really focus on the instructional practices that you feel that need to be present in the classrooms in order for students to perform in the manner that you would like them to perform. Now, I had a superintendent a couple years ago who had 3 questions, and his questions were, what do we want for our children? How are we going to provide it? And how will we know we've done it well? And when I think of student performance, I think that those 3 questions, or a variation of those three questions, in addition to a 4th question, really should guide student learning. So the first question is, what do we want our students to know or do? What is it that we want them to know or do? Now that should be guided not by the page in the textbook that students are on or that we're on. It should not be guided by what we wake up and that day feel like teaching. But that should be guided by standards that are guided through the curriculum that we have in place in our districts. And much of the curriculum now is guided by state standards, and we know that the standards that we're moving toward are Common Core, but those are still in the development stages. So what do we want our children to know or do, or students to know or do, should be the first question that we ask when we talk about instructional practices. Are the lessons that teachers are teaching, are they guided by standards that are common standards across all teachers, across each classroom that teaches that particular subject? And the second question is, how are we going to provide it? So once we have teachers with sound objectives based on curriculum that's based on standards, then we need to ask, what are the practices that we are going to employ in order to help students achieve mastery with those objectives? And are the practices that we're using best practices that have been found to be helpful across the board with research and also just in general practice with teachers in classrooms? And so do teachers think about, how am I going to teach this skill strategically to the students? And have I thought about how I'm going to teach the skill differently for the different students that are present in my classrooms, aka differentiated learning? And so first question, what do we want our students to know or do? Second question, how are we going to provide it? And the third question is, how are we going to know we did it well? Are there assessment techniques in place on a day-to-day basis so that when the students walk out of that classroom at the end of the day, end of the period, that we know which students mastered the objective, the task that we had before them that day, and which ones didn't, so that we know how to proceed? Now, I often, when I was teaching and when I was learning about teaching, we really did stop at the end of those 3 questions. What do we want our students to know? How are we going to provide it? And how are we going to assess it? But there really is, I believe, the most important question that we need to ask at the end of assessing students. What are we going to do differently? And that's a question that I ask my teachers to think about on a regular basis. What are you going to do differently tomorrow because of the assessment that you found out today that you did with your students? And so that really is what I believe has a strong impact on teaching and learning in our classroom. So when we talk about instructional practices, we need to think about how are we going to assess learning on a day-to-day basis, on a regular basis? What are some of those techniques that we are going to employ? And then what are some strategies that we can employ that are strategies for when students didn't get it or they did get it? Now, our last year, we employed CFIP, classroom-focused improvement process, which is a Maryland State Department of Ed stamp of approval program that was developed by Mike Hickey from Towson University and Ron Thompson from Towson University, and they have gone through many of the systems in Maryland, helping teachers and principals and administrators to understand this program. And I think that what is unique about this program is that it really relies on formative assessment on the day-to-day rather than on quarterly assessments or assessments that are almost autopsy data, what happened after the fact. And but the other thing that the CFIP does that has really impressed me is that it looks at what are we going to do differently, not just for the kids who didn't get it, but for the kids who did get it. Because at the end of every day, we have students who have already mastered the objectives, and then we have some who haven't. So depending on that breakdown, we may need, if we have a large number of students who have not mastered the objective, we may need to do some reteaching or to figure out how are we going to address that number of students who have not met the objective. And we may have a few students who have already mastered the objective and they need something to enrich their learning. And as a teacher, we need to think at the end of that period, at the end of the day, what are we going to do differently tomorrow for those students as well as for the students who didn't get it. Now, there's a couple of other things that we need to think about when we think about instructional practices. We need to make sure that they're connected to our vision. The vision shouldn't be connected to instructional practices. The instructional practices should be connected to the vision. We should be able to demonstrate that we are asking teachers to do something very specific in the classroom because it is the vision of the school. It's the direction, it's what we want to accomplish as a body, as a community. Because what we don't want to do is for teachers to see the instructional practices as isolated events, something that we're asking them to do because we think it's a good idea. That's not the case at all. In fact, even with a vision, we need to communicate as leaders, something's broken, something needs fixed, and that's why we have this vision. In order to address a deficit, in order to address something that is not there, that is not present. And with the instructional practices, we need to tie those instructional practices to the vision. So the teachers understand that, for instance, I didn't go to a conference and learn a new instructional strategy and all of a sudden I want to come back and employ and administer that in all of my classrooms because I was impressed with it and thought it was a great idea in some other school. What I need to communicate as a leader is that I believe this instructional practice will help us meet our vision or move toward our vision. And teachers will be much more, they'll be much more likely to want to employ the instructional practice that we're asking them to learn and do if they see that it's connected, that it's not just an idea. Now, I just want to lastly share something I'm doing differently this year related to vision and related to instructional practices. I had a teacher retire the year before last, and we had worked together for a number of years, and so she called me right before school and she said, you know, Frank, one of the things that I'm going to miss about the beginning of the school year is the birth of your vision theme. Because what it seems like happens is that over the summer, there is this theme that you have developed and you have with inside of you, and then we get to see the birth of that vision at the beginning of the school year and get some direction about where we're going to go for the remainder of the year. And that is it's been effective for a number of years. But this year, actually last year, I decided that I really wanted to do things differently. And that while I had some thoughts about where I wanted to go for the next year, I really wanted it to be a collaborative effort. So my last faculty meeting of last school year, I had my faculty members sit into teams, and we took the vision, the mission, and the values, and we broke those up, and we said, what do we need to do differently in order to live out these values, in order to live the vision and move toward the vision that we hope to accomplish? What needs to be fixed? Not from my perspective, not from my leadership team's perspective, but from everybody on the faculty, on the staff. And so they sat in groups in the cafeteria, and they identified areas that they felt we needed to focus on. So my leadership team next week is going to take all of that feedback, all of those pieces of paper that we received at that faculty meeting, and we're going to distill it, and we're going to try to look for themes that came out of that meeting. And then we're going to actually continue that work as a faculty on the first week back. So there won't be that birthing process on the first day or second day of school where Frank is the visionary leader, comes in and says, here's where we're going to go this year, staff, and come with me. But instead, what's going to happen is the faculty, the staff are going to come together and say, here's what we think needs to happen in order for us to realize this vision and this mission that we have identified. So I'm really looking forward to a fresh, new approach to vision, mission, and values for this year. And you'll get to be privy to how that goes, because we'll still be meeting as a class within the next 4 weeks. And so I will fill you in on how that's going. So this has been a great course so far. I hope that you have found it to be helpful. If you need some more feedback from me on a weekly basis, please make sure that you feel free to ask me for that. You all seem to be really being highly effective teams. You're working together well. You're letting each other know when you're having difficulty meeting deadlines or meeting those commitments that you've made to one another. If there are issues, this is the week to talk about it, because we have our mid-course survey that you will have an opportunity to communicate with each other about how well you're doing. I should have most of the part ones graded, if not within the next 12 to 18 hours, definitely by Friday. Part 2 is due at the end of week 5, so you're beginning to work on that. You're going to have time to get the feedback that you received from me about part 1, and hopefully that will be helpful. So continue to do the great work that you're doing. I know that you are getting ready to head back to school in the next week or so, and you're trying to capture the last few glimpses of summer that you can. And basically, since I've been out on leave most of this summer, even though I've been working from home, today being my first day back in the building, I feel like I really have already begun the school year. So take advantage of the last few weeks that you have, and have a great rest of your week.